person who has an animal who's having a firstborn, the Mishnah is saying ways that you can stop the kedusha, the sanctity, from going onto the animal, going onto the son. So the first case in the Mishnah was that it says if it's a boy, I want to bring it as an oba. I want to bring it as a carbon instead of a carbon. The Mishnah says it works. Why? Because the kedusha, the sanctity that comes from being a firstborn, only comes once the kid is born. If you would put other sanctity on it while it's still an oba, while it's still in the mother's stomach, because that came first, so that sanctity of an oba would come first. The Mishnah also said that we should say, and if it's a girl, if the baby's a girl, I want to bring it as a shlomen. In case we had an option for if it's a boy, I want to bring it as a oba. If it's a girl, I want to bring it as a shlomen. Ask the Gemara. In the cave is a shlomen, the cave of the Udsha of the Torah, what is the person doing in the Mishnah? If the firstborn is a female, then it doesn't have any kedusha. Right? All the halachas of the Torah apply if the firstborn is a male. So we understand why the Mishnah is saying if the firstborn is a male, then you should say I want to make it an oba before it's born. But why is the Mishnah talking to the person trying to, so to speak, prevent it from becoming a bukar, even if it's a female? There is no halacha of bukar. Right? It's a safer also the way of the hektish. You're right. The case where he was trying to say if it's a female, I want to bring it as a shlomen before it's born. That was a case where the animal belonged to hektish. Halacha is an animal which belongs to hektish, the kid which is born to it also will belong to hektish. So he's trying to prevent it from having to be brought, let's say, an animal of a kappas. So the kid would also have to have the status of a kappas. He's trying to prevent that and give it a different status of a shlomen. That is to say that kedusha, the sanctity from the mother, to get the same level of sanctity which the mother has only going to come when the kid is born. So if it's a female and he wants to avoid that and make it a shlomen earlier, he can do it while it's alive. While it's still pregnant. Okay, the elder shnei sfarim. In that case, the Mishnah said that there's two boys. But the halakha of the Mishnah said, the elder shnei sfarim, the Mishnah said, Echad mehem yaakov ola, one of them you should bring as an ola, and the second one will sell, and that person will bring it as an ola, and then he can get benefit from the money. Ask the Gemara, Amri, the behavior of the hektish. Once you told me that we're talking about an animal, a pregnant animal belongs to hektish, then why is that halakha true? The behavior of the hektish, the active ola, the other ola. The one which was brought as an ola, he could bring as an ola. Ida, may have it to shuffle. We make the second one to have the same level of kedusha, sanctity as the mother. If the mother was hektish, and the baby which is born to a mother which is hektish also belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. So why is the Mishnah saying that one of them is brought as a karban and the other isn't? It sounds like there's nothing to do with it. If you're right that you just answered, the Mishnah is talking about that the mother belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. The reason you said that was to explain why the person is trying to avoid the female which is being born to the mother. So then when you read the next line of the Mishnah, you are asking, and the halakha should be different. It should be the first one's brought as an ola, and the second one, which you didn't do anything to, so that should be a normal baby which was born to a mother which belongs to hektish. Right answer, Seifa Asam B'Bein Asul. That line of the Mishnah, that line is going back to a case where the mother is not hektish. In other words, the only case which we had to say, we had a question on the Mishnah. Why is the person coming to say, and if the baby's in a cave, if the baby's a girl, I want to bring the shlomen? What is he trying to avoid? If we're just talking about the halachas of having a firstborn before, so that applies to a male. So why is the person trying to do anything in the Mishnah to avoid the firstborn female? We said, no, that case must be that the mother was hektish, and what would happen is when the mother of hektish has a baby, it would also belong to the Beis HaMikdash, and the wants to change it, not for that carbon, but for a different carbon. So with the Gemara speaking in on this, but the other cases of the Mishnah, the simple understanding would be that we're talking about a person trying to avoid the firstborn before. Therefore, even though the line before we had to say the mother was belonged to the Beis Hamikdash, but the next line we go back to discussing a person trying to avoid the firstborn before. In other words, the line before was only discussing the mother was hectic and the person was trying to avoid the baby having the sanctity of the mother. And the second line goes back only to a discussion of before that the person is trying to avoid the baby having kiddushes before, having the halachas of the person. Okay, bottom line of the is the old Temurah goes. Taman kiddushes of kala alone. The suffering between them will lodos touching of Yosef Kiddush. The Gemara says the opinion from Gamliel, Rashi doesn't really going back on all the Mishnah. He's of the opinion that says that the children of Kachin only get the sanctity of the mother when they're born. The Esau could die to be making money into the ocean. And if you'll tell me that if you have an animal which belongs to Hector, and then it gets pregnant, you'll tell me that the kid inside of it has sanctity of Hector. Even while it's still inside the mother, my name Kedusha Kawallah. Consider Kedusha Dimani. But it already has the Kedusha from its mother. El Shema Bina, Vlade Kachin Bab Yosef Kedusha. See from the Mishnah that the Mishnah's understanding that just like when we were discussing Bechor, the firstborn, that there the halachas of Bechor come when the child is born. The Mishnah was talking to the person and said, that if the person is trying to avoid the kedusha, the halachas of before going onto the baby, so while the mother is still pregnant, he can sanctify the baby as a carbon. Okay? Then the Mishnah talked about another case, which was that if the mother was hectic and the person wanted to avoid the baby having the same halacha as the mother for that type of carbon, same thing, while the mother's still pregnant, say, I want to make it a shlom. So says the Gemara, it must be, that only works if you tell me that the sanctity of the kid only comes once the kid is born. So then while the mother's still pregnant, the kid has no sanctity as any specific carbon, and now you can preempt it and make it a shlom and make it a different carbon. But if you tell me that while the baby was still inside the mother, it already got the status of the mother, then it's too late. Can't do anything, just like by the mother, which let's say is already a chatos, a specific carbon. You're not going to be able to change it now. But if the kid, while it's still in the mother, is the same, how can you change it around? So it must be the opinion of the Mishnah is that the halachas only go on to the kid once it's born, and therefore if you did something while it's still pregnant, it's effective. The high town of Sabbath while we talk about the union and Gemara says, well, we have a different Tana who disagrees on that point, and he holds that the child of Hektish has sanctity even while it's still inside the mother. The Tana Rabbanan. We learned in the Brisa, Ilu Nemer Bechor Lo Yaktish Haisi Omer Bechor Lo Yaktish Hekdeshus. Okay, so we're going through a pasuk, and what the Gemara is breaking down is if the pasuk would have said the words differently, what it would have sounded like. So if it just would have said the words Bechor Lo Yaktish, so just to read the words on the side, the words we have is Ach Bechor Sheyivukar Lashem Bebehema. You have a firstborn animal, Lo Yaktish Isho, so that a person can't go and sanctify it for a different type of carbon. Okay, but the Gemara is breaking it down if it didn't say all those words. So we're saying if it just said Bechor Lo Yaktish, so that would have meant that a person who has a firstborn, Lo Yaktish, he can't sanctify it. So Hayisi Omer, I would have said Bechor Lo Yaktish Hekdeshus. The words of the pasuk basically would have said that a person who's a firstborn, Lo Yaktish, he can't sanctify. It would have sounded like a firstborn person is not able to make things hektish. So Talmud Lomar, but how do I know that's not true? Because the pasuk said Ish Oso. It said Oso Iatamaktish. The word Oso sounds like the firstborn can't sanctify something else.
So oso yata makdish aval makdish adam bechor hekdeshus. But he could sanctify other hekdeshus. It sounds like we're talking about a specific case that he can't sanctify, but he could sanctify other things. So says the Gemara, Vadayin ani omer hulo yakdish aval yakdishu acherim. So I still would have said that maybe the firstborn can't sanctify this firstborn animal, but other people could. Talmud omer bebehema sakti. So no, since it said the word behema, so it's coming to say that the firstborn animal, nobody can sanctify it. Okay, so far we understood that if you have a firstborn animal, once it's born, that the pasuk is saying a person is not able to go and transfer it as a different type of carbon. If it's born as a firstborn, the Torah gave its instructions of what to do with it. A person is not able to go and say, I want to bring it as a different type of carbon. So says the Brisa, maybe you can't sanctify it while it's still in the mother's stomach. So the pasuk says that once it's already a bechor to Hashem, you can't sanctify it. But before that point, while it's still in the mother's stomach, you could sanctify it. Okay, so that was discussing a bechor, a firstborn baby. Says the Brisa, Yochol af vlade kolakachim kain. You might think that this is true if you have an animal which belongs to hektish, and the firstborn, the baby's in the mother's stomach. I would think just like by the firstborn of bechor, you're able to sanctify it. You're able to make it a different type of carbon as long as the baby's still in the mother's stomach. Maybe that's also true by the children of a behema, of an animal which belongs to hektish. Talmud omer ach chalak. It says the word ach at the beginning of the pasuk, which is always a miyat. It's limiting what we just said. So that's the Brisa's source to tell me that even though by bechor, the firstborn, a person could, while the baby is still in its mother's stomach, a person could sanctify it as a different type of carbon. But when it comes to the mother, which belongs to hektish, to the Beis HaMikdash, a person cannot. So Alma, you see from that Brisa, Svir lev ladikachim me'eman hein kedoshim. That Brisa holds that the children of an animal which belongs to hektish has kedusha, has the sanctity, even while it's still in the mother's stomach. So what we're saying right now is we have a disagreement between our Mishnah and this Brisa about this point. That when you have an animal which belongs to hektish, belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, so the halacha is when the baby's born, it also has the status of hektish, belonging to the Beis HaMikdash. The disagreement is, at which point does that happen? Is that true even while the animal is pregnant? Or is that only true once the animal is born? What's the difference? The difference is if a person, while the animal was pregnant, would say, I want to sanctify it as a different type of carbon. Is it too late because the child already has the status of the mother? Or because the status only starts after it's born, so then as long as it's still pregnant, I could transfer the kedusha. Okay, Amr le Rav Amram le Rav Sheshas. Amr al Bachar im Yetzias Rubo Ola. If a person, as the point in time when the firstborn baby is getting its status of a Bachar, at that exact same time, a person said, I want to make it an Ola. I want to bring it as a different type of offering. Okay, so there's two things trying to jump onto this animal at the exact same time. One is that the Torah says at that point of being born, this animal has the status of a firstborn animal, and the person made his own statement, which is at that exact same time, I want to bring it as an Ola. So how do you deal with such a situation? There's two kedushas, so to speak, that are coming to jump onto the same animal at the same time. So what happens? Ola havi. Does it have the status of an Ola like the person said? O bechor havi. Or does it have the status of a firstborn? And the Gemara explains two different versions of how to phrase the question. Ola havi kol porta kanafek hukalu. Do you say it's an Ola? It seems like it's expressing a stringency. A stringency of an Ola is that the entire thing is brought up as a carbon. So maybe that's a reason that the Ola should go onto the animal. O bechor havi kol porta kanafek bimilsehu. Or maybe it should be a bechor because each part that comes out is like almost the more natural thing that would have happened to it. That it would have been a bechor if this person didn't get involved. So maybe that's a reason it should be a bechor. Lashon acher, shekein kedusha chayla aleha, udilma bechor havi shekein kedusha samirechem. That maybe the ola, maybe the animal has the status of an ola like the person did because he's making like a man-made declaration in it, or maybe it should have the status of a bechor, a firstborn animal, because that kedusha happens by itself. Okay, so that's two versions of how to speak out the question. So what's the question? You have an animal which if the person didn't get involved at that point in time would have the status of a firstborn. Where at that point of the baby being born, that's exactly the point in time when it gets the status of a firstborn. At the same time, the person says, I want to make it as an ola. So how do you deal with such a situation where there's two things talking to the animal at the same time? So which status does it get? Does it get the status of a bechar? It gets the status of an ola. So Amr lei, so he responded, Maiti boy lecha. What's your question? Hainu de boy ilfa. That's what Ilfa asked. Amar, ala leket im neshiras ruba yehei hefker. If a person had leket, and as it was becoming leket, which is one of the gifts a person has to give to the poor, as it's becoming leket, which is a gift just given to the poor, he said yehei hefker. At the same exact time, he said, I want to make it hefker. Hefker is relinquishing any ownership that I have, and now poor people can take it, rich people can take it, anybody can take it. So two things are trying to be chal, are going into this object at the exact same time. One is leket, which says poor people only can take this item. The other is hefker. The person made a man-made declaration that I want this to be ownerless, and on that, if that would happen, so then even rich people could take it. So he had this question, how do you deal with such a situation when there's two contradictory things talking to one item? So leket havi or hefker havi? Do you say it has the status of leket and only a poor person could take it, or do you say it's hefker? Leket havi shkein kedushas b'dei shamayim. Do you say it has the status of leket because that's what the Torah is instructing this object to become? Or maybe you say it's hefker because hefker is broader, that it talks to more people, even the rich people, the non-poor, can come and take this item. So V'amr Abaye, and Abaye responded to that, Mighty boyle. Abaye said, what's the question? Divrei harav v'divrei talmud, divrei mishomim. This is a phrase we have in the Gemara in very different context. In this case, the Gemara is saying, if you have a Rabbi and you have a student who are both instructing you to do something, so who do you listen to? Of course you listen to the Rabbi. So Hashem's the Rabbi, and we're the Talmud, we're the student, so to speak. So what the Gemara is saying is if you have my instructions versus Hashem's instructions about what to do to an item, so it's obvious who wins. So Hachanami Divri Mishomen. So too here, back to your question, which was this animal which Hashem's talking to it, so to speak, and saying it should become a Bechar, and I'm trying to talk to it and say, I want to make it into an Ola. So Divrei Rad, Divrei Talmud. If you have the Rebbe and you have the Talmud and the student, so who do you listen to? You listen to the Rebbe. So therefore, just like by the case of this thing which is becoming leket, which is going to poor people, and I'm trying to make it hefker to go even to non-poor people. Abaye said that you listen to Hashem, and therefore it has the status of leket only to poor people. So back to our case, this animal which Hashem's making it a bechar, and I'm trying to make it into an ola. At the same time, we go based on what Hashem said, and therefore it's going to have the status just of a bechar. Okay, says the Mishnah in Chaf Heyamar Aleph. Omer v'loda shel zu ola v'ishlamim dvarav kayamin. Person who says the child, he's standing in front of a pregnant animal, and he says the child of this pregnant animal I want to bring as an ola offering. V'hi, but the mother I want to bring as a shlamim. It's a different type of offering, a shlamim offering. Dvarav kayamin. It's effective. It works. In other words, the child he brings as an ola, and the mother he brings as a shlamim. Let's say he went the other way. He started talking about the mother first. He shlamim. She I want to bring as a shlamim. V'vlada ola. And I want to bring the child as an ola. So says the Mishnah, what's the halacha? Harei zev vlad azivche shlamim divrei Reb Meir. Reb Meir says even the child you have to bring as a shlamim. So if you said that, if you talked about the child first, so then you were able to break it up. You said I want to bring the child as this and the mother as this. So everyone agreed you could break that up. Once you talked about the mother first, so then it sounds like the way we're looking at it, according to Reb Meir, is that when you talked about the mother, we can associate that as including the child. So therefore you declared the mother and the child should be a shlamim. Now you're, so to speak, coming to also talk about the child again. So we deal with that as no. The first thing you said, that both should be a shlamim, is effective. And the second thing about the child being brought as an olah is ineffective. Rabbi Yossi says, Im lekachtes kavin tchila. If when you originally had said the mother's a shlamim, you had in your mind only the mother. So in other words, when you talked, you were only referencing the mother. Because it's impossible for you to say two things at once. Right? You can't say mother shlamim, child ola all at once. So because you have to express it in an order, so therefore if you tell us that that's what you had in mind, that only the mother should be a shlamim, and now I'm talking about the kid, so then says Rabbi Yossi, that's effective. So we'll deal with the mother as a shlamim, and the child as an ola. If after he said Harezu shlamim nimlach, he changed his mind, v'amar vlada ola harezu vlada shlamim. Says Rabbi Yossi, but I agree that if he originally said it's a shlamim, and he had in mind the mother and the child, and then he changes his mind and he said, no, I want to bring the child as an ola. So then Rabbi Yossi says, I agree, you can't change your mind in such a situation. Okay. Amr Rabbi Yochanan, hifrish chatas me'uberes. Says Rabbi Yochanan, if a person separated for a chatas, an animal which was pregnant, the yalda, and then it had the baby, ratza b'miskaper, ratza b'vlada miskaper. He can bring either the mother as his karban chatas, or the child he can bring as his karban chatas. My taima, says the Gemara, why is that true? Because of Rabbi Yochanan, im shayru meshuyer. The Rabbi Yochanan says, the way I deal with a mother and the child is two separate entities, and therefore if I would want to sanctify one for one kedusha and sanctify the other one for something else, I could. Uber lav yerech imohu. So that phrase means that the child, we don't view the child as another one of the mother's limbs. In other words, we don't look at it as there's one animal here. And just like the mother has many parts that make it up, so we don't look at the animal just as another part of her body. Rather, we deal with them as two separate entities. Therefore, it's like a person separated two separate animals as a chatos. To bring one, if he wants, he could bring this one. If he wants, he could bring that one. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying, just like if a person has an obligation to bring one karban chatas, and he wants an option, so he sets aside two animals, and he says, so I'm going to choose. I'll choose that animal or that animal. So the halacha is, okay, so choose one of the two, and you'll bring that one. So says Rabbi Yochanan, the way I view one pregnant cow is the exact same as two separate cows. So if you took one pregnant cow and separated it, so good. So you have two separate cows, mother and the baby. So once the baby's born, now you get to choose which one do you want to bring as your karban. Most of Rabbi Eliezer asked the question, he shlamim, the Mishnah said, it's a shlamim. Person said, the mother's a shlamim b'vlada ola, and the child's an ola, harei zev vlad shlamim. So the halacha the Mishnah said was, harei zev vlad shlamim. The vlad, the child, is a shlamim. Says the Gemara, Isal kadaitach shir meshuyer, harei zev vlad shlamim, harei zu shloim ba'imisna. If you're right, you deal with them as two separate entities, so then you shouldn't have said it's the child of a shlamim. The right way to phrase it would have been the baby itself is a shlamim. Deal with it as it's two separate entities. So what's he trying to attack? He's trying to say, I see from the way the Mishnah talked that we deal with it as there's one animal here, and the child is a product of the mother. Not that I deal with a pregnant cow as if there's two separate cows here, two separate entities. So you see the Mishnah referenced the child. It's the child of the mother. It didn't reference it, so to speak, as its own entity. Amar of Tavla Bar Mina. You can't ask from the Mishnah. Dahiha Amar Rav Latana Tana Harezu Shlamim, because Rav said to the Mishnah that the right way to phrase it really would be without that word Vlad, without the word the child of the mother. So you can't ask a question from the Mishnah being medayik from the word it said it's the child of a shlamim. Basically, there's a different version that Rav really said that word shouldn't be in the Mishnah. So you can't ask a question from that word in the Mishnah when there's basically a different way to have the Mishnah without that word. Okay, so we're back to the halacha of Rabbi Yochanan, which was that just like if you have two separate animals, which you set aside to bring one of them as a chatas, that works. So Rabbi Yochanan told me one pregnant animal, I deal with as two separate animals, and therefore once it's born, I could bring either one as my chatas. Meisvei ha'omer l'shivcha sareat shivcha v'vladach ben chayrin. If a person said to his shivcha, so it said to his female slave, he said, "You're still a slave, v'vladach ben chayrin, but your child is, I'm freeing them." So what happens in such a case? Im haisa ubra zachsalo. If she was pregnant with a child, says the Brisa, then the kid goes free. So again, you have a situation where you have a female slave who's pregnant with a child, and you give her everything you do in the freeing a slave, and you say it's not for you, it's just for the baby. So Uber Yerech Imo says, if you tell me you deal with her as one big entity, there's one person here, so to speak, Mishum Hachi Zachsalo, I understand why she's able to free the child. It'll be like giving to one person to free half of that person. So here you have a mother with a baby. If you view that as one bigger person, so then you gave to her to free a portion of her. And that works. And money Reb Meir, he like the opinion of Reb Meir Kedetanya, top of Amud Beis. That if a person frees half of an eved, Reb Meir says that portion goes free. Because the freement and the ability to accept it all come at once. But if you tell me, like Rabbi Yochanan was saying, that you deal with them as two separate entities, so now you have this pregnant slave, which you deal with her and her child has two separate entities. So imagine they were two separate people, two separate slaves to one owner. So amai zachsalo. So why would it be possible? It says the Gemara, it's not true. If you would have two separate slaves to one owner, and the owner would give it to one of his slaves to free the other slave. Says the Gemara, it doesn't go free. Vatanya nirin sha'eved zocha lekabel get shichrer shel chaveiro miad rabo sheina shelo. Bryce says a person could accept, a slave could accept the get, the document which frees his friend, as long as he belongs to a different owner. In other words, you have Eved number one, who's that person's owner, and I have Eved number two, which belongs to me. So I could give the get shichra, I could give the document to that person's slave to accept it from my person's slave. However, velo miyad rabba shelo. But if you have one owner with two slaves, an owner is not able to give a document to free slave number two. I can't give that to slave number one. And the reason is because if you're freeing a slave, it needs to be transferred out of the owner's property. The problem is that an eved, a slave, is the owner's property. So if you give it to your slave, which you're not freeing right now, so that's like transferring it from your left hand to your right hand. Because you own him, so then if I transfer it to my left hand to my right hand, nothing happened. So if I give it to my own slave, which is remaining my slave to free it for someone else, so I didn't transfer it out of my property. So says the Gemara that the Brisa said a person can give to a pregnant woman a get shichra, the document to free, and say, I only want your child to be freed and not you, and it works. Says the Gemara, if you tell me you deal with him as one big entity, So now I understand how it works. There's one person here, so to speak, and you're freeing a portion of that person. That we see works. But if you're telling me there's two separate people here, so then it shouldn't work. It's like two slaves to one owner, and you're freeing one slave by giving it to the other slave. You're giving it to the woman and saying, I'm only freeing your son, and I'm not freeing you. So how is it effective? When you transferred it to her, it never really left your property. Says the Gemara, Lashma minaim shayrein meshuyur. So that brisa is a proof, not like Rabbi Yochanan. Tiyufta the Rabbi Yochanan tiyufta, and there's a questioner in Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, so we're saying you're right. The only way to understand that brisa is to tell me that you deal with him as one big entity. Okay, says the Gemara, Leimayim shayrein meshuyur tanohi. We found this concept of whether you deal with him as one big entity or two is a disagreement somewhere else. The Tanya, Ha'omer l'shivchasa harei at ben chorun. Person who said to his female slave, you're going free, v'vladach eved. So the opposite case. Person says to his shivcha, you're going free, but your child's going to remain an eved. Vlada kemoha di Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So the first opinion said that when she goes free, the children also go free. Chachamim omrim dvar of kayamin. Chachamim say no, that it's effective, that she goes free and the children remain a slave. Mishum shene'emar ha'isha viladeha tiyeh ladoneha, because the pasuk says a woman and her children should be to the master. So ask the Gemara, Kra my Talmud l'Rabbanan. The brisa sounds like the Rabbanan are bringing a source for their opinion, which was that you're able to split the mother from the children. But the verse, the simple understanding would be the woman and her children, that there's a connection between the two. So the Gemara is asking, are the Rabbanan are bringing a source that you can split the mother from the child from the pasuk, which sounds like they're connected? So Amar Rabbi no, Krala Rabbi Yossi Agalili de Katani Vlada Kemoa. No, the right way to read it is the pasuk is a source for Rabbi Yossi Agalili, which was the first opinion, who said that when the mother goes free, the child follows the mother and also goes free. Because the pasuk says a mother and the children should be to the master. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili is reading it Bizman Sha'isha Ladonea Vlada Ladonea. When the mother belongs to the master, then the children do. When the mother doesn't, the children also don't. Okay, so we have a disagreement about that case. A person frees the shifra and says, I want your children to remain a slave. So does that work or it doesn't work? Do both go free or the children remain slaves? So my lav bakim mifli, Rabbi Yossi Savar Shairu Eina Meshuyur. Says the Gemara, isn't the machlokas, the Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who said that both go free, holds Shairu Eina Meshuyur. You deal with them as one entity and therefore you freed everything. For Rabbanan Savri Meshuyur, and the Rabbanan who say that it's effective and the children remain a slave because they deal with the mother as two separate entities, and therefore you only freed the mother but the children remain. So Rabbi Yochanan, no, Tekuli Alma Shairu Meshuyur. Both opinions could say, like I was saying, that you deal with them as two separate entities. Here, the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, who says that they both go free, that's because here there's Exeris HaKasav. Here the pasuk is saying explicitly that the children and not explicitly. Rabbi Yossi Aglili's understanding that the pasuk is saying that the mother, once the mother goes free, the children follow. Okay, so Elavade Lema Kihani Tanoi. So says the Gemara, I found somewhere else this disagreement of whether you deal with the mother and the child as two separate entities or one entity. Titania Hashochet as Hachatos person. So right now we're talking about a pregnant animal. That a person sanctified it while it was pregnant. Okay, so we have a pregnant animal, which a person was makdish, donated it to the Beis HaMikdash. So Hashochet as Hachatos Umatzaba ben Dalet Chai. Person checked it a chatos, and then you found there was a child inside. So one brisa says, what's the status of the child? One brisa says, that the baby has all the halachas of the mother and has the status of a chatas. the male Kohanim can eat it. Ein necheles elo liyom echad, needs to be eaten in one day. Ein necheles elo lifnim min hakloim, and it needs to be brought inside. Tanya Idach, another brisa said, necheles lekol adam, it has no restrictions. It can be eaten by anybody, necheles chol makam, anywhere, necheles laolam, anytime. So we have two brisas saying, right now we're understanding a person sanctified a pregnant animal as a chatos. We have two brisas with a disagreement. What's the status of the kid? So my love Tanoi, isn't this the machlokas? Tanakama savar. So Rashi has the words the opposite of the way we have it in our Gemara. So I'm going to read it like Rashi reads it. Tanakama savar shairo meshuyir. The Tanakama who held that the child has the status of a chatos holds shairo meshuyir, that you deal with them as two separate entities. And therefore, when you were makdish it, when you sanctified both the mother and the child separately. Umar Silver in the second brisa said, Shairu Eina Meshuyir, that you deal with them as two separate entities. And therefore, the hektish only came unto the mother. So, Omer Lecha Rabbi Yochanan, no, the Kuli Alma Im Shairu Meshuyir. Both brises, one which said that the child has the status of the mother and the one that didn't, both agree they have Im Shairu Meshuyir, that you deal with the mother and the child as two separate entities. Okay, so says Rashi, now we just switched the case. Until now we thought we were talking about a person had a pregnant animal which he sanctified. Now we're switching it as a person sanctified just an animal and then it became pregnant. And what's the disagreement? Mar Savar Vladik Kodshim Bavyasin Hein Kedoshim. One opinion holds that the child, like we had earlier, that the child of hektish only gets its status of being hektish once it's born, and this animal was not yet born, and therefore the Bryce is saying that it doesn't have kedusha. Umar Savar Vladi Kodshim B'mei Iman Hein Kedoshim, and the other Bryce which said that the child which was still inside has the halachas of the mother, holds that the child of hektish, even before it's born, just as it's growing with the mother, already has the halachas of hektish. Or another way to understand the two brises would be, one brise was talking about a case where you sanctified the mother ulavasofnis abra, and then later point the mother became pregnant. The other brisa was it already got pregnant and then you sanctified it. In other words, if it was already pregnant and you sanctified it, that's the brisa which says both the mother and the child have the kedusha. And the one which said only the mother was a case where you sanctified it and then it got pregnant, and it's like the opinion it only gets its kedusha on the child once it's born, and because it was not yet born, it didn't have that kedusha. Okay, maskefla Rava, mimai the time of the Rabbi Yochanan im Shairu Meshuyir. Rava asks, why are you assuming the understanding in Rabbi Yochanan is because im Shairu Meshuyir, because you deal with the mother and the child as two separate entities, and therefore, back to the top of the page, we had a question from the Brisa which said if you freed the slave, you gave to the mother and said, I just want to free the child. So the Brisa said it was effective. So the Gemara said that didn't make sense. That only made sense if you said that the mother and the child we deal with as one big entity, not like Rabbi Yochanan. So ask Rava, why did you assume the reason in Rabbi Yochanan is because im Shairu Meshuyir? You deal with the mother and the child as two separate entities. Dil behind the time of the Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe I could tell you a different reason in Rabbi Yochanan which would answer that question. The other miskaper b'shvach hektish. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan holds that a person can bring as a carbon shvach hektish, something which grew out of hektish, he can bring as a carbon. In other words, it's not because when he sanctified it, we deal with them as two separate entities. It's even without that. It's just if you had one animal, and meaning even if you would have one animal which was hektish, and then it got pregnant and had a baby. So even in that case, Rabbi Yochanan would say because it grew out of hektish, so then it's okay. And then you're not limiting his opinion to saying you deal with the mother and the child as two separate entities, and you won't have the question which you asked above. Omer le Rav Hamnuna, Rabbi Eliezer Talmidei de Rabbi Yochanan. So Rav Hamnuna responds, Rabbi Elazar was the student of Rabbi Yochanan. V'yosiv l'kamed Rabbi Yochanan, and he was sitting in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Meaning Rabbi Lazar, who asked that question in Rabbi Yochanan, asked the question to Rabbi Yochanan, his Rebbe. So Rabbi Lazar asked the question, and Rabbi Yochanan, who was sitting there, didn't have an answer to the question. And you're coming to suggest another explanation for Rabbi Yochanan which would answer the question? We were saying a very, very practical response. We had a conversation between the student and the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said something, and the student raised his hand or didn't raise his hand and asked the question, and the Rebbe was stumped. Okay, Rabbi Lazar asked Rabbi Yochanan a question, and Rabbi Yochanan didn't have an answer. So Rabbi was suggesting, well, maybe we could say a different pshat in Rabbi Yochanan, which would answer the question. Gemara's response is, all right, well, let's go back to that episode. Why did Rabbi Yochanan not answer the question that way? It must be he held what he held. The reason his halacha was true is because you deal with the mother and the child as two separate entities, and that's why Rabbi Yochanan didn't have an answer to his question. Okay, says the Gemara, harezu shlamim nimlach. So that last line of the Mishnah, which said that if a person said, again, we're talking about a person had a pregnant animal in front of him. A person said, harezu shlamim. He said, I want to make the whole thing a shlamim. So everyone agreed. The Mishnah said that if he said, I want to make the whole thing, the mother and the child, a shlamim, and then he was nimlach, he changed his mind and said, no, I want to make the child into an olo. Said the Mishnah, you're not able to change your mind. Asked the Gemara, pshita, vlad shlamim. It's obvious the child has the status of his original declaration that it should be a shlamim. Elakol amos debay mimlach. You would think, what, his whole life he could change his mind, and he sanctified as a shlamim, in a year now he could come back and say, never mind, I want to make it an ola. So we're asking, what is the Mishnah coming to teach me? Every case in the Mishnah is coming to tell me a halacha, something that I wouldn't have known. The Gemara's question is, this case is obvious. The Mishnah is telling you, even though he said it in Toch Kidei Dibur is the time it takes a Talmud to say Shalom Alecha Rebbe, right? Those few seconds. So even though he said it within those few seconds, Mahu de Tema Toch Kidei Dibur Kedibur Dami Vayunit Kama Ayin Kamashmalon, you would have thought we should say Toch Kidei Dibur Kedibur Dami. Normally, the halacha is that if a person changes something within that short amount of time, he could retract. So I would have thought you should say that here. Kamash Malon, the Mishnah is teaching me, don't say that here. So now the question is, why don't you say that here? Right? In all other halachas, I think the most interesting example, at least to me, is halacha is if a person loses a relative, there's a obligation to tear kriya, to rip one of the begadim. So the Gemara says that if he ripped his beged and then the person passed away a second later, the ripping works. Why? So even though the sequence was totally off, in other words, the obligation to rip comes after the person passed away, we normally deal with that section of time, that's those a couple seconds, we normally deal with that as like one entity of time. And therefore, even though in sequence, practically, we know the ripping preceded the misa, we normally deal with it as it's like the person passed away and then he ripped. So it's a very interesting Gemara over here that the Gemara seems to be saying that the Mishnah is telling me by Kudshim, I don't say such a rule. So I don't have a good explanation for what the source for this is, but this Gemara is a chiddush. Okay, shkoyach.